But if I'm shutting it down, I got to shut it down to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even now, I keep a grocery sack on my hiking pack, and I'll pack out whatever I can when I'm walking around in the woods. Like, I leave a lot of stuff because I can't carry but so much, or not. And also, I'm only going to carry so much. Like, if everybody did that when they went into the woods, then there wouldn't have to be things left over, you know?
Oh, yeah, well.
But me and Nathan experienced this whenever we were in the Jeep Club. We would take my trailer and my truck and his Jeep and our time, and we would, like, one of the places we cleaned up was Nimbleville. We started from where the pavement turned to gravel, and we cleaned up all the way to the last campsite. We cleaned all of it up. We got all the trees out of the road. We cleaned up the campsites. We cleaned out the fire rings. We got all the trash out of there. I hauled off like 1,600 pounds of trash out of there in my trailer. It took us we went up there and camped. It took us like 2 days. It was like, I don't know, man. A couple months went by, and I drove out there just to check. It was already trashed again.
Oh, yeah.
And then people were like, well, why are they closing it down? Well, this is why, because when you go out there, take your trash back with you. It's not hard.
And see, it's not just campsites they're closing down. You know, I was reading not long ago about one of the recreational parks over in Gainesville, and they had just went in and redone the bathrooms in the park, redone parking spots and this and that, new guardrails. Well, the park was closed down, and someone broke in the bathrooms, and it was like $12,000.
Like a county park?
Yeah, county park.
Oh, wow.
And it was like they busted the sinks, busted the toilets, busted everything, the mirrors, and they done like $12,000 worth of damage. And they're like, look, we just redone this park. Mm-hmm. We're not fixing this. We're closing this park down.
Yeah, I don't know what the rationale is. I've tried to think about it, like, even when I was younger and doing stupid shit that I shouldn't have been doing, I never once in my mind thought, hey, we're out doing stupid shit. Let's go destroy somebody else's property. You know, I never, like, the closest I've probably ever got to destroying somebody's property is maybe cutting some donuts in a vehicle where I wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I probably tore up some property at some point in time. But, like, I never deliberately left trash, or I never deliberately, you know, destroyed a bathroom or an outhouse, or, you know, up in the mountains, privies or whatever. I never deliberately did that. It's kind of like last year, the year before, up at Rock Creek, they got down in there in the creek, up above Rock Creek, and turned that valve that shut the water off to the hatchery. And there was like $100,000 worth of fish died because somebody turned the valve off. Like, why are you down there messing with a valve? It's not like, come on, man.
No, I get it 100%. You know, like, I get you want to go out, you want to adventure around, you want to explore, but there's a point where it's not being adventurous anymore. It's being, you know, destructive.
Well, I think there's a conversation to be had about adventuring around and exploring, and then there's a conversation to be had about deliberately doing something. You got people who are, I would be very shocked if those people who done that, and I don't know who they were, I just read the article about it, but, you know, I'd be very surprised if those people who done that were younger than 20 years old, and they weren't exploring anything. They were exploring the bank with probably a joint and a Bud Light, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which, teach their own, but come on, man. You're messing with shit you shouldn't be messing with.
Yeah, exactly.
So I asked you what the biggest deer was. What about fish? What's the biggest fish you've ever caught?
Oh, man. The biggest fish, I mean, the biggest bass I have ever caught is probably in the 11-pound, 12-pound range.
That's a good bass.
Oh, yeah, it was a tank. It was a unit.
Did you catch that over by my parents' old house in the cove down there?
No, this one was actually over off Cox Road.
Okay.
Down in Cumming.
Okay.
And there's actually it's a farm pond.
See there?
Yep. And the whole top of this pond was an algae mat.
Yep.
And so you could use like a heavy weight worm rig.
Punch through it.
And you could punch through and just barely jerk, just jumping it around. Or you could use, you know, a weedless setup with nothing on it and just slowly drag it across that top of the mat.
They'd hit it.
And, dude, they'd tear them up. That was probably the biggest bass I've ever caught, and I've caught a couple, 7, 8 pounds, kind of in that upper range.
Right.
I think the largest catfish I've probably ever caught was probably about 18.
Yeah, I think that's about average for catfish. From what I know, talking to people, I think the biggest one I've caught is like 14 or 15.
Yeah.
But I've never caught a bass that big. I think maybe the biggest bass I've ever caught is 3 or 4 pounds. But I don't really do a whole lot of bass fishing. I do more trout fishing.
I was about to say, I remember back when you were heavily into trout fishing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not heavily into it, but I still make time to go several times per year. Yeah, I tried to do the bass fishing thing, and I even went out with my buddy Hunter a few times this year on his boat, just trying to make myself do it. I'm just not a bass fisherman, I guess, is what I chalk it up to. Like, I can't figure the techniques out on how to work the rigs, and I can't figure out, the cranking ratios. And I mean, he put me right on bass. I could see him in the water, and it didn't matter what the hell I tied on. I could not catch him. So, but I remember years ago when I was a kid, I would go out striper fishing with my grandfather and my great-grandfather. He had a pontoon boat. And we would go troll around the coves and catch a bunch of like bluegill and stuff like that. And we'd use it as bait, and we would downrig right off the boat. And we would always tie off Brown's Bridge on 369, which now it used to be the green metal bridge, the iconic metal bridge. And now they've rebuilt it, and it's just, a normal bridge. But we would tie off under there. And I think Hunter was telling me the last time he was out on his boat, it's like over 100 feet deep on the depth finder right there. But I remember setting the down rigs off the pontoon. We would roll the line out and just let it drop. And I think we were pulling about a foot out at a time, and we were dropping down to like 60 feet.
Yeah.
I think it was like 12 or 15 pounds, a striper I caught doing that. It's probably the biggest fish that I've ever hooked into ever. And that was a fight, man. That was wild. I can't imagine hooking into like a 10 or 11 pound largemouth, or even smallmouth for that matter.
Yeah.
11 pound smallmouth, I think, is getting probably on to the bigger side, right?
That's actually
record.
Yeah, I don't know what the record is, but I know some of the fishing championships that I watch, and they catch smallmouth in those, 5, 6 pounds. That's a big smallmouth.
Okay, so I'm way overthinking it then.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, man, trout fishing. You don't do a lot of trout fishing, do you?
I did when I was younger.
Yeah.
When I was a lot younger, Devil's Elbow.
Okay, yeah.
I used to go over there all the time. Crickets and corn, man. That's all we used.
I haven't been fishing at Devil's Elbow ever. There's been a couple of times I've wanted to go over there and fish, but you start getting into some weird laws and regulations when you get over in that area. Kind of like what we were talking about hunting a while ago. Like, Georgia's got some really strange river laws when it comes to property lines and what you own and what you don't own, and especially right there at Devil's Elbow. It's like from Steel Bridge at Devil's Elbow to 136, or no, 53, which is Edge of the World Bridge. And it's like probably 4 miles of river right there between the two bridges, if I had to guess. I've never floated that section, but I know people put in at tubes at Devil's Elbow at Steel Bridge, and they float down to the 53 bridge. It's 4 or 5 miles, maybe 6. But like that, from that 53 bridge up the Steel Bridge is like artificial lures only, barbless, this, that, and the other. And like, it's to the point where I've witnessed guys stand at the 53 bridge downstream and cast upstream
under the bridge.
Yeah. And I'm like, what is that really doing? Other than if DNR walks down here, which we know DNR stays here a lot. This is a popular area. They've got a whole parking area for, trout fishermen. Plus, it's also a handicap area. They've got a handicap spot built there now. And like, if a DNR walks down here, you're going to get in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
And what are you benefiting from this? You're not catching anything.
Not normally.
No, I mean, you're not. Come on, man. Just go somewhere else. But anyways, the whole thing, what I'm trying to point out is like, we don't, like, there's so many rules and regulations that you got to follow and watch right in there now. And that's part of the reason that I've kind of been drawn away from the whole trout fishing thing, is because the last few years, there's been like this huge debate in Georgia Supreme Court or whatever about river laws. And it's like, you don't own the water.
Yeah.
Well, I might not own the water, but I own the dirt that's under the water. And I own to this specific spot in there. So if you so much as step in this specific area, well, the law's coming. And it's like, man, I don't want to be on a river somewhere just trying to enjoy my day and then have to be dealing with this crap. Like, it's starting to get ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. If you're floating down the river and you flip your kayak upside down, you got to crawl out on the bank, get everything back in order, and then you have a landowner running down the bank at you like you're going to jail.
Yeah, so that's actually a pretty big thing that we have to deal with in whitewater. So just right over here in LJ, there's really popular river that we all kayak called the Cartacay River, and it's a Class 2 run. So it's a very good learning grounds. Like, that's where most people who are getting into whitewater go. All of the rapids have recovery pools. It's not a hard run, and it's real short. It's only like 2 miles. But from the time you put in till basically all the way to Blackberry, it's private on both sides. And so it's like, I've witnessed people, like homeowners, be out in their yard. People be trying to like recover their boat standing in ankle deep water on the side of the bank. Like, don't you come on my property.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? Come on, man. And there's like signs I have to put in that says, no, don't be walking off in the woods to pee. Nobody wants to see that. And I'm just like, why? Like, how do we get to this point?
Yeah.
But so with fishing, it's like, I've seen guys, and they do this a lot up in Helen on the Sequoia River. They go up and there's like 1 mile of public property on the Sequoia. Everything else is private, and it's guided fishing tours. So you come in and you pay, a guide to bring you out on the river and waders, and they'll put you on these giant, like 18, 19, 20 inch, just butterball trout, trophy size. And guys will literally get on that mile stretch of public, and they'll put their waders on, and they'll try to wade up, the Sequoia. But the one thing that saves that river and that area, or saves those people, is that it's deep. So a lot of guys will get in there and their waders will fill up, and then it turns into a rescue situation because somebody's drowning,
Yep.
So it's like, you did real good. You're trying to do something illegal, and now you're having to pay a lot of money for search and rescue to come get your ass out of the river.
Oh, yeah. I mean, once I've been in waders, and I've had waders fill up on me. Mm-hmm. Once they're full, it's hard to get out of them. You can't get out of them fast, and it's hard to get out of them. And if you're in a strong current, you're going wherever it wants to take you. Yeah,
so I don't really fish a lot in the wintertime for trout for that reason, because I don't want to wear waders.
Yeah.
And waders are dangerous in my opinion, and so in the summertime, I'll just walk out with shorts and tennis shoes on into the river, and it's not a huge deal, but even now that I've had swiftwater rescue, like, I don't know that even with the things that I've been taught, and that if I were to be wearing a pair of waders and I'm a pretty strong swimmer. I did good in my class, but I don't know that I could self-rescue if I was in that situation.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I've had them fill up, and I've had them drag me down the river a little ways, and I'm a very good swimmer.
Yeah.
I used to all the time swimming nonstop.
Yeah.
I hold my breath forever, swim forever, not an issue. But once they fill up and you're getting dragged, it's part of your mind is like, hey, I need to get out of these. But the issue is trying to get out is you're also getting panicking. You're getting beat into rocks. You're going under the water, out of the water, under the water.
Mm-hmm.
And you're having to calm down. But, finally, if you're lucky like I was, you get to a calm spot or you get caught up on something, you get to where you can get your footing again.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I was lucky the times it's happened to me.
So one of the things that I haven't had to teach a lot of people, but there's been a few times where I've been hiking and there's a river crossing that you have to cross. And when I go across the river, if it's wide enough, I'll unbuckle my chest strap and I'll unbuckle my hip strap. And people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, there's no guarantee that you're not going to fall. And if you fall in this water waist deep and you have your pack on and it's buckled to you, it's going to drag you underwater and then you're not going to be able to get it off. Yep. And it's going to sweep you downstream. So being proactive, I unbuckle things so that if I do fall, all I've got to do is roll out of the pack.
Yeah.
I might lose my pack, but I'm not dead.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And my pack, more than likely, if I look downstream, it's going to be hung up on a rock or something down there. And my shit might be wet, but I can build a fire and dry it out, and I'll still be alive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, not only that, I mean, if you lose your pack, that most rivers at some point or creeks or crossings like that downriver, they get shallow somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah, exactly. It'll be in an eddy or hung up on a tree or something somewhere. All you got to do is look for it. All right, I got what I know you've hiked quite a bit, you've camped, you've hunted. Do you have any kind of like crazy stories of things that's like what would be the craziest thing that you experienced while being like outdoors?
That's actually a very good question because there's a couple small things that to me is not really that big of a deal, and some people might be like, oh man, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I think probably one of the biggest things is actually where I learned to hunt, over there at my great granny's
Cherokee County.
in Cherokee County.
Yeah.
We was over there one time hunting. Couldn't tell you what it was, couldn't tell you if it was someone messing with us, cousin out in the woods messing with us, or what it was, but we were sitting out there getting dark late in the evening, and stuff's just quiet, eerie, a little feeling. Mm-hmm. And we were out there, and the next thing you know is it's not like someone walking, I wouldn't say, but it was just kind of a repetitive sound. And it was, kind of like how a deer will stomp their foot sometimes, it'll stomp and wait a little while, and it'll stomp again and wait. But that's a very distinct sound.
Right.
And so usually if you have a deer stomping at you, you can tell what it is. But we was out there, it was getting dark, couldn't see maybe 20 feet, 30 feet at tops. Like it was time to come out of the woods.
Right.
But there was a sound, it just started, and my uncle, he was the one hunting with me, he's like, he was freaking out. I was young enough to the point I didn't know what was going on. But he was freaking out like, we need to get out of here. And it never clicked with me, never registered like what was going on, but I still don't know what it was, but he was absolutely freaked out.
So the noise, like, I was talking to Nathan about this. There's an experience that we had, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it right now because I'm planning on having Nathan come on, and your brother Hunter was there. He experienced it too. And actually, it was me, my brother Zach, your brother Hunter, and my brother Nathan. Zach and I were at the campfire. Hunter and Nathan had walked off into the woods to gather firewood, and it was after dark. And they had something similar happen. Nathan described the noise as sort of a humming, almost like a flying sound. I don't even know what he means by flying, but whatever it was, he described as like it was coming at him through the woods at a high rate of speed to the point that he drew a gun on it and yelled at it. And when he yelled, it stopped. And then he described the noise of it coming through the woods as a humming or a flying sound. Because same thing, though. We never seen it. And Nathan says it's probably less than 100 yards from where they were in the woods to me and Zach. And Zach and I never heard nothing. We didn't hear him screaming. We didn't hear anything in the woods. We didn't hear anything. We were completely oblivious. And when they got back, they were obviously panicked.
And shook up.
Yeah. And and even just a few nights ago, Nathan was still like, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to make speculation, but it was weird. And like, I've never experienced that before. And it's changed the way I think about when I go into the woods.
Well, see, to kind of describe the sound that I was hearing, because I remember the sound. I remember the whole situation fairly well. The sound, I kind of said it kind of like a deer stomping its foot, but it's when a deer stomps its foot.
Would you describe it as like a wood knock? Like if somebody took like a bat or a piece of split firewood and knocked it against a tree, say 50 yards out, would you describe it as that noise or?
Very similar.
Very similar?
It was very similar to that. It wasn't necessarily like a piece of wood knocking on something. It was something. It wasn't being knocked on the ground. I wouldn't say, but it was something was hitting another object. What it was, I couldn't tell you, but it was very repetitive, and it was very evenly spaced out.
So was it like, was it like 3 or 4 knocks or whatever in a row, and then like a pause, and then 3 or 4 knocks in a row again, or was it like a 4, 5, 6 knocks in a row, and then just kind of until y'all were out of there?
No, it kept doing it the entire time we was even up moving, getting out of there. But if I remember exactly right, I don't think it was ever like a 2, 3 stop for a little while and then go again. It was a steady
one after the other.
Yeah, it was steady the entire time.
Okay, interesting. It's good stuff, man. Like that's what I like to hear, people's crazy experiences like that.
Well, see, and that's a big one that to me at the time I wasn't like, oh my God, because I was so young. That was more or less I was with my uncle and he was freaking out, and so like another one for me, just me. Is, I've been out in the woods before, you're early morning, late evening, and, you hear this or you hear that, and you're like, oh, man, what was that? Well, I was actually coming out of a hunt one time, and it was a sound, and I remember the sound. It wasn't like a person yelling or it wasn't like a coyote howling. It was a sound that I don't know how to describe to an extent. But it was one of those sounds when you hear it, you just freeze. And
you don't forget the sound.
Yeah. And it was, like I said, it was late evening, already dark, using a flashlight coming out of the woods. And I was like, it just froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Like it was bone chilling, just, you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was, man. And after about standing there for probably 30 seconds, like just froze, I'm like, I got to get the hell out of here.
Right.
And so I just made a beeline. I knew where I was going. I knew the trail to get out. And it was pitch black, man. I was running with a flashlight, tree limbs slapping me in the face. And I finally get out, and I had another guy that I was hunting with. He was already out. He texts me 15 minutes ago, like, hey, man, I'm getting out before it gets too dark.
Right.
Dude, he said he heard me tearing through the woods coming. He was like,
did he hear the noise?
No.
He didn't hear the noise?
No, that was the thing.
He didn't hear anything. He had no clue, right?
And believe it or not, from where I was at to him was probably only 50, 60 yards till I was out of the woods.
Right.
And it was loud enough that I thought he should have been able to hear it. But I got out of the woods, and I'm literally running. I got out of the woods, and I had, tree limbs smacking me in the face, saw briars catching me on the neck. I'm bleeding and stuff everywhere. And he's like, man, what's going on? I'm like, there is no way you didn't hear that.
Right.
He's like, hear what?
And then you get the whole, no, man, you're just, your mind's playing tricks on you.
Oh, yeah. Well, at first, I was like, he's playing tricks on me. His ass heard it.
Right.
Like, you heard this. Don't tell me you didn't. And he kept on. He's like, no, man, I'm dead serious. I didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
He's like, all I could hear, he said, I could see your flashlight coming through the woods. He said, and I seen you stop. He said, but then after that, all I heard was you running. And I'm like, so you could hear me running through the woods.
But you didn't hear what I heard.
But you didn't hear what I heard. He's like, no, man.
So this question is one of the popular questions that I'm going to ask everybody, because
All
I
right.
think this is the one I just asked you about what's your craziest experience, because I think this is like, I think it's going to generate a lot of good stories. I'm kind of like speculative on a lot of the stories are going to kind of lean the same direction, where just from talking to people outside of the podcast, stories that I've shared with other people or they've shared with me is like, everybody's stories kind of lean the same way. Everybody's experienced something at some point in time, and usually they were by themselves. Occasionally there was one other person involved, and there's no way to explain what it was or what they heard, and everybody else always thinks they're crazy.
Oh yeah.
But then, you could like, I could say, hey man, what's the craziest thing? And you tell me. And you're like, I'm like, no man, come on.
Yeah.
But then you could be like, hey man, what's the craziest story you had? And then I could tell you a story and you'd be like, wait a minute, that sounds really similar to what I just told you. How can you not believe me? But you're telling me the same thing. But it's because I think people aren't open-minded enough to realize, hey, like, we have very similar stories. There's similar stories with these people over here. Like, I don't know. I went down a long rabbit hole in this kind of stuff, but I definitely think that there's something going on in the woods. What it is to still be unexplained. And you can go down all kinds of rabbit holes about what people think it is, from Bigfoot to feral people to aliens.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if we don't all acknowledge that there's something there never will be, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But so many people have stories of things that's happened, like the 2 stories that you and I just shared. And then you can go on, and there's 4 and 5 hour long documentaries about people going missing in national forests every day.
Oh, yeah.
Or national parks every day. And some of them are found alive 5 days later. Some of them may never be found again. Only boots or rifles are found, and nobody knows what happens to them.
Yeah, without a trace.
I think it's kind of ignorant to think that there's nothing in our woods. Like, there's something out there. We hear it. We tell stories about it.
Yeah.
People are being abducted. Like, eventually, maybe, I don't know if in our lifetime, but maybe something will be, like, figured out what it is exactly that we're all hearing and seeing and telling stories on.
And seeing, kind of like what you just said, you talk to a lot of people, and the stories kind of lean this way and that way, and it's usually one person by themselves or maybe 2 at tops. There's actually a story that I can tell you that there was probably 9 people that were there and awake and seen it, and it was at my great-granny's as well.
Yeah, I believe that.
We come pulling up. It was a long gravel driveway, way down to the old house. And then from the house, there was another path that curved around to the left behind the house. That's where the barn was. That's where they stored the hay and everything else. And there was a big, like, cattle gate right there, a 6-foot cattle gate.
Okay.
And we come pulling down through there, and it was my dad and my Uncle Tony driving. It was me, I think maybe my brother and my cousin, my Uncle Tony's daughter. And we come pulling back through there, and my Aunt Joyce, she was inside the house. My mom was inside the house. My great-granny was inside the house. We come pulling down through there, and my dad was driving. Tony, he was in the passenger seat, and we got out. And he goes, "What is that?" And I'm like, young, and I didn't know what was going on. And my dad walked over there, and they both started freaking out, just absolutely freaking out. Didn't know, was screaming, yelling, kids go inside the house. And so, we're all shuffled inside the house. Mm-hmm. My dad's yelling, "Bring me a gun, bring me a gun." And so my mom ended up running out. I can't remember if it was my mom or my Aunt Joyce, but one of them took out with a gun outside. And I went back out with them, and I remember seeing it. And so you have the house, then behind that you have the actual barn with a 6-foot cattle gate, right? 6 foot. Mm-hmm. But dude, there was 2 huge, I don't know if they were eyes. I don't know if they were orbs or what they were. But they were floating probably another 4 foot above the cattle gate.
Okay. So 10 feet.
About 10 feet in the air.
Right.
And they were all freaking out, screaming and yelling. And so, like I said, it was, you know, at least 7 people that seen the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, they shot at it.
How'd that go?
They disappear, but you can hear something tearing off through the cornfield. And so the next day, they freaked out. We actually loaded up everyone that night and left. The next day, we come back home, and the corn was maybe 3 foot, 4 foot that time of year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 200-acre field. There was a trail tore clean across the field, all the way to the other side.
So when they shot, was there any like audible screams or moans or
no sound at all? No, there was the crack of the gun. That was it. There was no sound. You could just hear something.
So have any of y'all ever discussed this like later now that everyone's older?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And no one can say it was this. No one can say it was that.
But everyone remembers it.
Oh yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And that was the biggest event that I know of where the most people seen and heard the same thing.
Yeah.
Like I said, we loaded up. We left that night. They didn't know what it was, had no clue.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to things like being in the woods and seeing things like that, that's a pretty big group of people. Like, you usually don't hear big groups of people like that. Now, I've heard recently and read things about there's been a lot of UFO phenomenon going on in like South America, and there's like whole towns and villages, 500,000 people gathered outside for whatever event are seeing these things in the air. And last year, the year before, we went up, there's a Bigfoot museum, one town up from here it's the Bigfoot Experience. And you go in there and they have, they got a lot of gimmicky shit in there. Like they got casts that are supposedly, Bigfoot's foot cast and stuff like that. But there's a lot of actually, you got to look for it and you got to know, you got to be open-minded and know what you're looking at. But there's a lot of things in there that are like actually hard to explain. And so one of my favorite parts of this is they've got a room that's probably as big as this area here. And it's newspaper clippings that have been blown up to full-size paper size. Mm-hmm. It's just from all over the world, all over everywhere. And it's sightings of Bigfoot or, they call them different things. So like over in Nepal, they call them Yetis, or Asia might call them something else. But they're just from all over the world. And it's like you're standing there and you're reading this and you're going, okay, well, I might be crazy. I might be seeing shit. You might be crazy, you might be seeing shit, but hundreds of millions of people all around the world who report this same type of incident, same sort of story, all the profile fits. We're not all crazy, not all of us, can be.
No.
You could even go as far as saying, okay, a group of 500 people claim they all seen the same thing. Okay, well, that 500 group of people might all be on LSD. So they could all be crazy.
Yeah.
100 million people scattered throughout the world, in every different country, every different city, across the oceans from each other, all have similar stories of something. I'm not going to say it's a Bigfoot or a Yeti or none of that, but this is where I seen it, was the Bigfoot Museum. They've all seen and had various stories of these same things. Like, we're not all crazy. Not all 100 million of us.
No, and not only that, I mean, you can go back to look back before, hundreds of years ago.
So that was another thing that the Bigfoot Museum has. They have it's made to look like a sign, but it's in the shape of a teepee, and it's got 100 different boards on it. And on each one of those boards is a different name. And it's 100 different names that the Native Americans called the Bigfoot or the wood booger, or I don't know. There's like 100 different ones on there. Some of them you can't even pronounce because it's like an Indian language. And I have listened and read some stories about, especially in California, like up towards the Olympus Peninsula, where there's like a big hot spot of these things, the Hoopa Indian Reservation up there. the elders of the Hoopa Indian Reservation, they talk about the stories that have been passed down through generations, and they're all the same.
Yeah.
They literally, like, if you put the generations ago stories compared to our stories, there's going to be differences. But the general premise of the story is all the same. It starts out with, we heard something, we heard this, we heard that, we experienced something running through the woods at us. We, generations and generations and hundreds of millions of people experiencing the same basic story. There's got to be something to explain it.
Oh, yeah, there's going to be.
It might not be Bigfoot. It might not be aliens. It might not be what we want it to be, what we want to believe it is. That's why I'm not going to say, like, hey, I think it's exactly this. Most people who know me know that I'm, like, big into Bigfoot. I like that kind of shit, but I'm not going to say specifically that the few encounters I've had were Bigfoot, because I don't know. I never seen anything. But I seen, and I know I heard something. I experienced some sort of thing that made me in a panic. Mm-hmm. A couple different times. In different places, different states. I've been hiking in North Carolina and had things happen to me that are not really explainable other than, hey, this is what happened. I didn't see anything, and I just heard and experienced this.
And seeing that kind of goes back to everyone, well, maybe he's seen or heard this, but I seen and heard that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a little difference, but it's kind of the same premises.
I was about to say, but then at the end of the day, when you put the two stories side by side and you start breaking them down and profiling them, essentially they're the same story. They're just told a little different. Told from my point of view or your point of view.
Oh, yeah. That's, with me and you could be in the same situation.
And the stories are going to be different.
Yeah, you're going to tell it how you seen and remembered it, and I'm going to tell it how I seen it.
And that's why I want Nathan and your brother to come on, because Hunter was with him when this happened. Hunter has talked about it a little bit, but he's not really given like a whole spill of what his idea or whatever it is or was. But Nathan's pretty open about it. And I've talked to several people about this specific story, and I've had a bunch of people like, hey man, you need to sit him down, get him behind a camera or audio and get him to get his story out. And like, you should tell it. And I'm like, it's not my story to tell.
Yeah.
Like I could turn that story into a million different things if I wanted to. It's not mine.
Oh yeah.
Like I want to bring him on and let him tell the story. Cause I was there, but I didn't experience it like he did. I was just there.
You were there whenever they came back.
So I know, like I was there. And so I know what he was like after the experience.
Yep.
So I know that he's not lying about what happened, but I don't know what happened because I didn't experience it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. You were there, but you only seen the aftermath of what happened. You weren't in this situation.
Yeah, and I mean, that wasn't very far from here. We were just right up in LJ, real close to Springer Mountain. I've talked to a bunch of other people who are familiar with that area. Nobody else has ever seen or heard anything like that. The Army Rangers do a lot of training right there, all in those woods. A ranger stopped me one day on the road there and was like, hey man, I'm looking for Hawk Mountain Shelter. That's where I'm going. I'm like, well, right here's Hawk Mountain. Just go over Hawk Mountain. It should be right there. He's like, can you show me on a map? He had a topo map. I guess they were probably doing land navigation classes. And I was like, yeah, man. I showed him on the topo map where to go. And he's like, all right, thanks. And I was like, you've been out here for a few nights, right? I can tell, you're training. He's like, yeah. You ever heard anything like crazy that you can't explain? No, man, I ain't heard anything. I'm like, okay, well, keep an eye out when you're up on Hawk Mountain tonight, you know?
Just so you know.
Yeah, keep an eye. I never told him. He didn't ask. Yeah. But I'm like, okay, well, keep an ear out when you're up on Hawk Mountain tonight. Because that was the mountain we were on. We were on Hawk Mountain. But, yeah, man, it's crazy.
It's one thing, to sit down and listen and talk to people and be able to hear their side of situations. Because you can watch documentaries, you watch this and read articles and do research here and there, but actually sit down and talk with someone that has been in a situation is totally different.
Yeah, because you also find out that people have stories that you don't even know about.
Oh yeah.
Like, we've never talked about this before. I would have never guessed that you had some sort of story like that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
We've never talked about it. It's never been brought up. We've never been like, hey. And I think a lot of people probably just kind of keep it hush hush like that.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of people are like, nah, man, you're fucking crazy. Like, what are you talking about? So we just don't talk about it.
Well, see, I know a lot of people that's been in the woods, hunting, hiking, camping. Everyone has some kind of story. Everyone, but most of them don't want to talk about it. They don't want to say nothing about it because someone's gonna be like, "Man, you're crazy. You didn't hear that. You didn't see that."
Yeah, exactly. And there are a couple things that I've experienced that I've not like shared with a whole lot of people, but people that I know are like-minded and won't judge or won't think I'm crazy. I've talked to about before, but this story with Nathan and Hunter, we were talking about it at work one day, and it started that way. Like, these people were like, "No, man." And so then I started telling the story, and I started explaining things, and I'm like, they were like, "So you're actually being serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, this really happened. Like, this is what we experienced on this mountain that day." And of course, you're talking to a lot of people who probably have never even been camping in their entire life, so it's kind of like out of the realm of possibilities for them to understand what's going on. But all right, man. So you wouldn't believe it, but that's an hour and a half already we've been sitting here talking.
Yeah, no, I can believe that.
So I think we're going to wrap it up here. I think that leaves it open-ended for another conversation in the future.
Absolutely.
And it was great to have you on, man. I appreciate you coming on and doing this.
Yeah, man, no problem.
All right, guys. All right, man. Before we close this out, I have a favor to ask from the audience. One, could you please be sure you subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening so that you can receive all new episodes right when they're released. And then if you could, go ahead and head over to iTunes or the Apple Podcast app and leave a review. Man, tell us what you enjoyed or what we could do better. Offer up a guest recommendation, etc. This will help tremendously in letting Apple know that people are actually enjoying the content, and it will help us be put into the search engines or recommended more often in the search engines. And lastly, Dirtbag Adventures is on several social platforms, including YouTube. Really, the best way to reach this content is by going to www.dirtbagadventurespodcast.buzzsprout.com. And then once you're on the website, you'll see the podcast episodes down at the bottom in chronological order. And then at the top of the homepage, you'll find all of the social links for the other various platforms that Dirtbag Adventures is on. And thank you again for joining me in this episode of the Dirtbag Adventures podcast. Catch you on the next one.